Why do you need to lease a land for you to fetch carbon? Something that you can do it's not even, you don't have to own. You can agree with the community and you move on.
There is no welfare for the people. There is no welfare for the planet. Only profits, profits, profits every day.
It is not genuine.
What is Italy doing in an Africa Climate Summit? What is the European Investment Bank doing in Africa Climate Summit? These are genuine questions. Are we invited to their summit? Do we go there for their summit? We don't. We are just pawns. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the TUA podcast third episode. My name is Jeffrey Thurieng, and I'm your host for today. And today I'm joined by Gabriel Musoni, who is going to introduce himself very quickly and be as detailed as possible.
I'm Gabriel Musuni, as said by Mr. Japheth. I'm pleasure to be hosted today here as a guest. I'm Gabriel. I come from Narok County. I'm so passionate about community development, indigenous people rights, and also human rights perspective, and also climate action. So I'm a graduate with a degree in project planning and management, and I work with an organization called Masai Mara Forest Community Organization, and also community paralegal, an organization called Indigenous Livelihood Enhancement Partners, where we work to ensure that the interest of the communities living along the Masai Mara forest is restored, and also the community land is registered. So I have an experience working in issues to do with the community, especially on community lands, and also I've been giving my insights and perspective on the ongoing cases about the community lands, starting from the Masai Mara forest. We have the one in Olkiombo, Masai Mara. We also have other like Kibiku land, and therefore it has all along been into my hand, and I've also been giving my perspective and also my opinion on the same. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabriel, and please call me Japheth.
Yeah.
So the today's episode is going to focus on when the West goes green, Africa bleeds, and the theme is we are looking at the dark side of the global green transition. So that's carbon credits or carbon colonialism, as we call it, land grabs, and the price Africa pays for Western climate guilt. Also, the goal is to unpack how carbon markets and conservation schemes are reshaping African land sovereignty and justice, and what real climate reparations look like. So, looking at this is not the first time Africans are talking about carbon credits. Back when King Charles came here, we saw the Ogie community being evicted from their ancestral lands. And I would just like the listeners and our audience to imagine being told that they must leave their ancestral lands. For example, the Ogie is their ancestral forests, not because they have burnt it, but because someone maybe in London or Dubai or in the United States wants to buy their trees or their forests to offset their emissions, which is not something that sounds really cool, right? So, as I've highlighted, when the West goes green, Africa bleeds. The question for you is, what does it really mean when climate justice becomes climate business, from your perspective?
Okay, on my perspective and also from the observation or from what I've looked, the issue or the business of carbon is not really meant to do the right purpose or what we really agree on. We have seen communities suffering, the land dispossession, and the land grabbing taking place, and this is happening in the guise of carbon markets. The West, on that perspective, the global North, are not really committed on the issue of green transition or the just transition, as they say. This issue of carbon is being used as a bogus, or is being used as an excuse of grabbing the lands, especially in Kenya. We have also seen happening in Zimbabwe, in West Africa, most of the countries, and it doesn't mean to serve its purpose. In my perspective, or in my community, we have seen the eviction that happened in 2023. We have seen the Maasai people, which I hail from, the Ogiek community being evicted in the guise of carbon markets, and in the guise of conservation, but in real sense, it's carbon markets which are taking place. Also, we have seen the communities in Ngorongoro, the Maasai in Ngorongoro, Tanzania, being also evicted from their lands because of the issues of carbon markets. So, for honestly speaking, the carbon market has not really been aimed to serve its purpose, but it has just been an interest or a game of the elites and also the game of the big boys. We have seen issues emanating from this carbon business, like the lack of what we call a free prior informed consent, FPIC, which is the cornerstone or a game changer in especially in carbon markets or any or community development initiatives. We also have community development agreements, CDS, which are not really being factored or featured in the businesses of carbon market. Kenya as a signatory or also as a member of the Paris Agreement, which was also which stipulated the reduction of emissions, is not really working to make sure that the carbon markets are really being done with the highest level of integrity. So on that perspective, the communities suffers. We also have communities like those who live in the Masai Mara, in the conservancies, who are being subjected to lease, whereby you are told you lease your land for more than 50 years, which does not really reflect or does not serve the intended purpose. But to speak on that, I want to talk about the Climate Change Act of 2023, which was implemented by Parliament and adopted, and maybe, I think, yeah, it was implemented. And it highly stipulated whereby we should have a carbon regulatory in the country. It also talked of benefit sharing between the communities and also between the agencies, and also the aspect of FPIC. Because actually, if you talk about carbon markets in Kenya, you talk about the communities, or most probably the indigenous communities, who still have the terrains or the large terrains of their lands. We have seen other companies coming in place, which maybe I cannot mention from here. We have seen them, especially operating in the northern side of Kenya, and they have also been following the same route, and it is really causing a lot of chaos, confusion, especially in Kenya today. We have seen other companies working in Kajiado County, whereby they are paying $2 per acre annually, which really tells about the rot in the carbon markets today. But on the same note, it is also good we say that there has been effort to really make sure that we adopt on voluntary carbon markets and adoption to the highest level of integrity. I must applaud the Office of the Special Envoy on Climate Change, who hosted the carbon market conference early this year, and a framework was adopted, and I hope a compliance is in place. Also, on the perspective of on the continental perspective, we recently had the carbon markets conference in, I think it was in Durban, South Africa, and actually some of the recommendations we saw, maybe it was investment, green economy, but sad to see that the community interest was not featured in. On the concluded ACS2 African Climate Summit in Ethiopia, actually, we have seen the same issue of community interest being featured in FPIC, Kenyans transiting to green economy, and also the just transition in the renewable sector. Actually, we can say it's one of the things that has also been highlighted in the ICS2, and one of the key uptakes that they are going to take to COP30, which is going to take place in Belém, Brazil. Last but not least, also have seen the Ministry of Climate Change, Environment and Climate Change have also adopted in their NDCs, or nationally determined contribution. Also, the carbon markets regulatory framework have been adopted, and also it's also a milestone, especially in the carbon market. So we are optimistic that maybe a few years to come, the carbon markets might also be aligned to the highest level of integrity.
Thank you, Gabriel. I would like to follow up on a number of things there. And I have 2 or 3 questions.
Okay.
The first one is on the communities you've mentioned, the Maasai community in Ngorongoro, also the one in northern Kenya. So that one is the Northern Rangelands Trust that you don't want to mention. So the question here is about the agreements. Who signs these deals? Who gets to negotiate for the community? Because most of the deals are actually signed in secret. We never know what's in there. For example, we have the UAE-based Blue Carbon Company that signed deals that is equivalent to the size of Britain. If you go to countries like Liberia, Zambia, Tanzania, they own lands there 10% of each country's landmass. In Zimbabwe is over 20%. So the question here is, who really benefits from these deals? Is it the people? Is it the government? Is it the companies behind these carbon offset schemes?
Okay, in my understanding, or yes, how I have really researched and looked on, the issue or the carbon market have not really been much, what do you say, like the communities or it has not been really, people are not fast with it. And maybe one of the things we could have done in our education system was to include carbon markets as one, or maybe climate action with carbon markets one of the topics. Today, you can realize that it's a few members of the society or a few members of us who really understand the carbon markets. And today, even as like on my personal level, I've attended so many conferences that talks about carbon markets, and you could still see that there is a lot of deficiencies, or there is a lot that you still need to learn as a person. So on this issue of these companies that are coming to operate, I can really say that there is a few individuals who takes advantage of the naivety and the ignorance of the community to benefit. These companies, I also found their way of doing things because they don't involve the community. They pick a few individuals, they pay them, and these few individuals comes and speak as the agents of the community. But in real sense, they are not really highlighting or going to highlight the interests of the community. And that's what I've talked about FPIC. If we implement the aspect of FPIC, the free prior informed consent, I can tell you that there will be we will not see these cases going to we will not see such kind of cases again. So the FPIC is not really being implemented, and the communities are not really aware of what is this. Even the community development agreements are not being taken in place. Like we can talk of government perspective. If a government want to initiate a development project, they undertake what we call public participation. I don't understand why is it hard for these companies to also undertake public participation without using other individuals or other organizations who just want to benefit at the expense of the community.
I hear you on that, on the need to do public participation and free and informed consent. But you see, it is very difficult for a continent where most people don't have access to the internet.
Yeah, sure.
And when they do, either access is very slow or very limited. It has been, for example, in Kenya, it has been over 60 years since independence, right?
Yeah.
And the Lancaster House Agreement, or the out of that conference, what they talked about, what they discussed, the deal they signed, we don't have access to it. We don't even know. And the same thing is being repeated right now.
Sure.
And we are calling ourselves independent. Are we witnessing a new scramble and partition for Africa just in a greener way, or is this actually climate action?
Okay, in my understanding, I can say that this issue of green economy inclusive of carbon markets is not really intended for its purpose. And I'm sorry to say so, it's quite controversial, but it's a fact. It's a new colonialism that we have we are still being subjected to the yokes that we have been 60 years ago. Like today, if you see, there is this called this aspect of climate finance. Today, climate finance is being given out in form of loans, whereby after a period of years, the money that were given as form of climate finance, the countries which received are forced to pay back in form of loans. Yet the reparations have not just been taking place for example, in developing countries. And I loved the ACS2 team because this was one of the things that was highlighted as one of the agendas of the African Climate Summit. So the issue of green economy is not really genuine, and it's until now we roll our sleeves to make sure that whatever being said, whatever being agreed, is of our interest as a continent or also as a country. Also, it is also important we understand that Kenya, particularly, or African countries, with this highest level of maybe the lowest level of education, we also have another sinister problem, and that is ignorance. We are not really interested to look at these documents. We are not really interested to look at these agreements. We are not really, we don't have that energy to really come out and look in nitty-gritty. What are these documents being signed, or what are these things being implemented? For example, at the moment we have a bill that is going on, being sponsored by the Office of the President of Marginalized and Minority Communities, which is taking rounds, and we have seen it has captured some elements. I personally have looked at it. Also, when you see that carbon market agreements or formulation, also you have to look at it. The Climate Change Act of 2023, you have to look at it. So the challenge we have today, especially young people, is the level of ignorance is very high. And if we really get that time to sacrifice our time to look at this document in nitty-gritty, to make sure that whatever is captured is in tandem with what we really want as a generation, as a country, or also as a continent. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. I want to move to the next question, but I just want to, I would like you to deliberate further on this. The Finance Bill 2024, the youth took their time, they read it, and for those who could not understand English, there were youth who volunteered to actually translate the bill or tell them what it means to them, to Kenyans. And we saw young people taking action, right? And the president said that he's pulled back down the bill, right? He pulled down the bill.
Yeah, he pulled down.
Now, the other day we saw a Kenyan member of parliament saying that they actually broke the bill into 4 separate bills and passed them. So is it a matter of ignorance, or is it a matter of playing like in a clown show? Right now, the other day we saw the president, the former prime minister of Kenya, Raila Odinga, passed away.
Yeah, sure.
And the moment he passed away, we saw 8 bills were passed or signed into law. And the president said that is a coincidence. Mm-hmm. Even you as Gabriel, have you read all those 8 bills?
I can say at my level, I've just get a bit of it. Haven't been able to really look at it. But now the problem is we get taken by the winds.
Yes, I don't want to put you in a difficult position, but you see my point.
Yes.
There's always distractions here and there.
Yeah, sure.
And if this is a matter of governance here in Kenya that are being so complex,
okay,
can you imagine what it is like for communities that don't even have access to the internet, that don't have the know-how and the expertise to go through these policies, to go through these agreements? How are they going to know what's right for them, what's not right for them, if they're not even involved in the discussion in the first place? So yes, we can blame ignorance on one hand, but on the other hand, there's also deliberate measures that are being taken to exclude these communities from the conversations that they need to be in. And even during public participation, they just do it to tick a box, not really to take your opinions into consideration or your needs into consideration, which is a major issue. But you can share something on that for a minute or two before we proceed.
Okay, as we highlighted earlier, I think there was a day we talked about what we called systemic elimination. It's also one of the challenges we have today, because even those who are implementing this, they make sure that the most vibrant, the most vocal, and those with highest advocacy skills are not really involved. Also there's a lot of deception taking place, and it's very sad that even in the leadership of the day there's a lot of deception, a lot of manipulation. So I think also to add on ignorance is also that level of deceptive and systemic elimination, which is now a challenge. You see even those who are vocal, who are so vocal, being eliminated, sometimes being intimidated, and it's one of the challenges we are facing today. So I think this one needs more of, I don't know how I can put it, but it needs more of, it's a struggle actually. It's a struggle also, just as how our forefathers struggled to have independence in Kenya. It's the same effort we are going to do today to struggle. It's also a struggle to earn independence on this. Thank you.
Thank you. So independence, our forefathers really struggled,
Yeah,
but
sure.
are we really independent? A conversation for another day. But now I would like to invite you to tell us from your understanding, how do the mechanics of carbon credits work? What are the mechanics behind carbon credits? How does it work for our audience to understand?
Okay, as I said earlier, carbon market is the most complex unit you can ever understand. You can understand. It's very complex. It is very, what do we say? It is very complex. It's very complicated, and it takes a lot of time to understand, because initially carbon market was not intended to run its purpose. Maybe carbon markets came with other intentions. Now maybe after people raising eyebrows, that's now when you see it is being packed or is being fit to suit the interest maybe of those who are raising faces. But actually, I can also understand that their perspective, because now we have different levels of carbon sequestration. We have the red plus carbon, which we have seen in Kenya. Maybe it's working. You see the Kasigao community, the red plus, the Chulu Hills. I think it's at some point it's working on the red forest, on the rainforest carbon. But now the problem we have is the soil carbon, which actually is now the issue of leasing coming in place. We also have the terrestrial carbon, we have the marine carbon, which now doesn't have much to do with community lands. We also have the biochar, which comes from the normal perspective of the way our waste, organic waste, and also how we conserve maybe conserve the environment. So the challenge we have today is the soil carbon sequestration. And that's where you see people going loggerheads because of leasing. And in my understanding, I don't understand why you need to lease a land for you to do carbon sequestration. If you really meant to empower communities, or if you mean to entrench climate finance, or if you meant to do emissions, you don't really need to own a land for you to do carbon markets. You can still do it to do carbon sequestration. You can still do it in agreement with the community. You can still do it in a way like you interact with the community without really having a lot of hostility. But now, because of that issue of leasing and maybe takeovers of land, that's where you see now the fight and the struggles come in. So I think that's where we miss the point, and it's until now the issue of leasing, because I don't understand, why do you need to lease a land for you to fetch carbon? Something that you can do it's not even, you don't have to own. You can agree with the community and you move on. So I think that's where the challenge comes in, and it's until we become very clear on that, that's now when we are going to work on it. But I can also see the Ministry of Environment have also set in place regulations for to have a depository, but it's not really highlighting the issue of leasing of lands. I think that's the challenge. That's the whole thing that is tainting the carbon market.
Thank you. So if I understand you, this is how it works, right? Companies come to Africa, they encroach African land and forest
Okay.
for forest protection, right?
Okay.
Then there is the certifiers like Vera,
Yes.
who now come and access potential carbon savings.
Okay.
Then credits are sold to polluters, which
Polluters.
are like licenses to go and pollute
Go
to,
and pollute.
as they call it, offset current emissions. And then local communities lose land access while polluters continue business as usual. So the people who actually pay for these all are the communities. Because the moment your land has been leased, you cannot do anything in that
Yeah,
land.
sure.
You cannot, can you even go there to pluck fruits?
You can't.
You can't.
Yeah, even it's a trespass.
Trespass.
Yes, a trespass.
That is a problem, and I understand why the Ogi community are still pursuing this their case 8 years after there was a court ruling, and even the UN special rapporteur has been saying that that court ruling has to be respected or to be implemented. Now, I want to look at some facts and some data on this. Number one, 90% of rainforest carbon credits certified by Vera are likely bogus. That's according to the Guardian investigation back in 2023. Another fact, 85% of UN clean development mechanism offset projects fail to reduce emissions. That according to EU Commission study. Looking at all these, I'll just go with those two sets of data. And we've talked about who actually benefits from this. I'm bringing the conversation to the key problems with carbon offsets, and I only want to talk about two of these. Number one is on, let's say, forest, right? If you plant eucalyptus, can be 10,000 acres, can be 100,000 acres, are you still eligible for carbon credits? And how does that benefit the biodiversity in that region?
Okay, on that question, we have to be very specific on which kind of trees we should plant. Like now, on my perspective or on how I understand, indigenous trees or the rainforest, maybe the Mao forest, the Congo forest, that is ideal for carbon sequestration. But now if you plant eucalyptus, there is no proof that it can absorb or it can reduce emissions. So in that matter, I think it's just planting in the name of complying to certain standards or to certain requirements, but it doesn't really means well in this aspect of carbon markets. You see, the focus is in the territories owned by indigenous communities, and it is where maybe the real sequestration or the real offsetting of carbon can really be said, or absorption of carbon can take place. Also, on that perspective of the rainforest, the data that has been said, I can really agree with it, because there has not been really clear or concerted effort to fetch carbon. What is happening is just giving people permission to continue doing emissions, to continue exploiting the nature. I think, and it's one of the reasons why I always advocate for what we call the loss and damage fund. It could make sense more than carbon markets. Reason being, I don't really need to be reminded to protect the ecosystem, because it's a thing I've been doing. It's a thing I'm really aware of it. I know the importance of it, because even like the perspective of Mao forest, where I come from, Masai Mao forest, our ancestors knew the importance of the forest, and they were never interested in going to partition it or to subdivide into group ranch. They thought the importance of it. So the best they can do is just, if you are willing to implement climate finance, do it in a genuine way without coming to tell us you have to carbon finance, you have to you have to comply to these kind of regulations. Like us in the perspective, in the African perspective, are we in the global north going to instruct companies on how they should reduce emissions? We are not. You see. So I think it's just part of the colonialism. It's part of the effort to intimidate Africans. It's part of. I think it is not clear on what is the reason behind it. Because if carbon market was meant to really benefit African countries or the global south, it should not come with such kind of conditions or such kind of issues like leasing of lands.
Thank you. And that's why I highlighted the two sets of evidence. You see, it's the same countries that are polluting, that are pushing for this carbon markets thing. And also companies in that same country are the one producing this kind of, doing the kind of research that we get this evidence from. But these member states still continue to push for carbon markets. There is a reason why they don't want loss and damage fund. And there's a reason why they want carbon markets. And even in the loss and damage fund, the other day, but I think in Sharm el Sheikh, COP27, countries from the global south really celebrated that. That was a win. But was it really a win? It wasn't, because you look at the deal they were given is a raw deal. It is going to take time for this loss and damage fund to be established. And even who is hosting this fund? You see, the World Bank is supposed to host the fund. The office is supposed to be set up in Europe, not in the global south, where this the loss and damage, the communities that the marginalized and vulnerable communities that are actually at the front line of climate change are the ones bearing the brunt. No, they have to be set up in other areas that are already polluting. The same thing they're doing for carbon markets. I don't know the data about who are the majority of carbon traders in Kenya, but I have a feeling, or I think most of them are not even Kenyans or Africans, if you do a deep research. So in this climate change business, only us are going there genuinely as Africans. We are going there with the intention to solve climate action. But the countries responsible, the companies responsible, they're just business as usual. And that also includes the activists who hop from one summit to the other. They don't care about whether their communities are compensated or not. No, they're only going there for ambitious commitments. Be it commitments on reduction of emission, be it commitment on climate finance. But if you look at the real value of these conferences, there's nothing to show for it, just pictures from different countries. But I hope you go to COP30 though.
Okay, on the to add on that, now we have what we call the carbon developers, and I think 90% of carbon developers in Kenya today are not companies owned by Kenyans. Carbon developers are companies established elsewhere. They just come to implement what they have agreed here in Kenya. On the issue of loss and damage fund and also carbon market, it's like we are being remotely controlled. We are not being given that autonomy needed for us to do our own things. Because if it's all about, COP means Conference of Parties who are assigned to UNFCCC. And I guess most of the African countries are assigned to it. What was so difficult in setting up the offices in Kenya today, or in one of the countries in the global south? Why should it be such bureaucratic that it has to be set up in Europe or elsewhere, who are not maybe even in the receiving end of climate change? It's one of the things that we have to address. And I don't know now the team that is going to COP. I don't know what the kind of commitments or kind of maybe issues they are going to present there. Because in my perspective, I think those are the issues that should be presented. Also, as I said earlier, the issue of debts, the accrued debts as a reason of climate finance. Because I think countries in the global south should not be forced to pay this money in form of debts, but also they should be receiving them maybe in form of the grants.
I get you on the conversation on grants and loans, but do we need either? Honestly, do we? Because the more we need the more we're asking for grants, means we are on the receiving end. Sure. It means we don't get to actually dictate what the conversation should be on, what action should be taken. You're always asking for grants, and somebody actually said this on TikTok the other day that applying for grants is just professional begging. And I can't agree more. You look at proposals that we write, they're always, you have to demean your community first. We are vulnerable, we need capacity building, we need empowerment, but do we really? Because you can't say you want capacity building, you want empowerment, yet you're saying you are from an indigenous community, you have indigenous knowledge. What empowerment do you need? You already have for example, from the Maasai community, you have the forests, you have the rivers, you have the land, and these resources or these are part of us. They know who they belong to, right? Mm-hmm. They know where they belong. The people who are the challenge are us Africans, who I think sometimes we forget that these things are ours. And we are told that don't use that, we will give you funds so that you don't use that. That's how carbon credits work, right? Sure, carbon credits work. Don't use your resources, don't cut the trees, we are paying you for this. The moment you sign that deal, you must be aware that you are receiving a very small end of the stick, and they control everything from the company. Africa doesn't even have a company that verifies carbon credits. Most of the professionals are not Africans. And you've said already that is a very complex thing to understand. So when are we going to take the initiative to actually understand carbon credits? Because people are saying out there that it is a bad thing for us Africans in the short term and in the long run. But our leaders are still pushing this. We saw our president the other day pushing for this. Even the 15 billion tree planting initiative is geared toward this.
Absolutely.
And we're looking at communities. From Kenya, we have the Ogiek. In Congo, we have the Total Oil Company that achieved their offsets by displacing families there. In Liberia, there are protests because of secret deals with blue carbon. So the question here is, if climate action is uprooting the people protecting nature, the indigenous communities, the local communities, whose climate are we really saving?
In my understanding, as how you've projected, I think it's also high time we accelerate on what we call nature-based solutions. And also we adopt on what we call self-determination, especially as indigenous communities, that we can really implement this agenda without really begging for support, because we are vast with indigenous knowledge, and also on the indigenous perspective, we can be able to use it and achieve most of the agenda or most of the initiatives we want as far as the ecosystem and the biodiversity is concerned.
Thank you. Looking at nature-based solution, which is something that is very close to my heart, yeah, sure. There are concerns that companies can actually use them to greenwash. They're saying nature-based solution, but then they're not doing anything on their end. They're letting nature to solve the problem that they're the ones causing. And there are risks, especially for indigenous communities, because even in these conferences, you find that they're talking about nature-based solution, but indigenous communities are not even represented in there. So when it comes to self-determination, how will indigenous communities ensure this? Are there already mechanisms or frameworks within your own community, for example, where you have strategies of self-determination? You don't have to tell me the strategy, but is there anything like that?
Yes, of course. Like the indigenous communities are now also on their way of also trying to understand their biodiversity, and they don't need really to be reminded by governments or the organizations on the importance of the ecosystem. The self-determination now they are doing is how to overcome the barriers. For example, the climate change barriers, how they should also overcome issues of natural calamities, how they adapt to situations around, like, and also how to protect their ecosystems and their biodiversity.
Thank you. I have a question here, and I'm really looking forward to the day that indigenous communities actually rise up and tell the government to go play fair, and other organizations, because that's their land. You come there, you follow their rules, you follow their norms. Now I'm looking at, because right now we're talking about when the West goes green, Africa bleeds, right?
Yeah.
But some of the biggest culprits are not even from the West. They are Gulf states who are coming here in Africa to buy green legitimacy and African land through carbon credits and carbon offsets, right? And they do this, but while they're doing this, they're some of the biggest producers of oil. Every year they produce, is it tons or gallons of barrels? I don't know what they use in measuring quantity of oil, but they produce a lot of oil every year. Oil, gas, they do that. And then they come here to do carbon offsets. What does it really mean for us, Africa, in this context?
Okay, in COP28, one of the key agenda or one of the conclusions or declarations was the issue of fossil fuels and the just transition. And actually, you've seen the idea of a just transition coming now to Kenya, countries like Kenya, because after now we have the issue is the projects like Turkana wind power. We have also have seen some kind of electric cars moving in place. We've seen the president launching on electric. We've seen the Gant, is it a Gant dam in Ethiopia that was launched recently? It's part of the just transition that
The dam,
yes,
the Grand Renaissance Dam.
yeah, the Grand Renaissance Dam. It's part of the just transition because it's a source of renewable energy. But now, as we highlight on the achievements and the initiatives that the African countries are doing in transiting from fossil fuel to renewable energy, we are not being given data or the amount of or the initiatives the Gulf countries are taking also on transmitting to this. The best they are doing is to come here in Kenya to buy the legitimacy, to do hand trophying like we are seeing in Tanzania. Because so I think it is not genuine. The just transition discussion is not genuine. Because if it is genuine, all countries should comply to it. Because why should we come and push it in Africa? Yet in the Asian countries, they are still they are largest producers of fossil fuel. So it's also one of the very complex discussions, one of the complex things. And while we look forward to see, maybe you've seen World Bank initiating some renewable projects. But now my question is, are they doing it to those countries or they are just doing it here in Kenya to legitimize the damage those people in the Gulf countries are doing?
That is the question, and that is the concern. Those are the questions we should be asking ourselves, because countries like the UAE and Saudi Arabia, according to their African carbon strategy, you'll see that they are now the new colonial powers in carbon.
Sure.
For example, UAE Carbon Alliance has committed 450 million to purchase African carbon credits over 6 years, so 2023-2029. They announced that the 2023 Africa Climate Switch was hosted here in Nairobi. That one was announced here. And that's also the Abu Dhabi Global Markets established regulated carbon trading exchange in 2023. This creates guaranteed demand, drawing new offset projects across continent. Saudi Arabia's role in this is this. They've set up, they have a regional voluntary carbon market company, organized world's 2 largest carbon auctions, and then they sold 3.5 million tons of credits in 2023, with 70% from African carbon offsets. Saudi Aramco, which is world's largest oil company, is the principal buyer. They set it, they buy it. And they partnered with US firm Expansive to launch a permanent carbon exchange in 2024. What they're doing here is specifically controlling all stages, from generation to trading to purchasing of carbon credits. We are just pawns in the game.
Chess and pawns.
Yeah, we are just they just place us here, come for public participation. Now you'll find that they're even the ones funding activists to go to these conferences.
Yeah, sure.
They're the ones paying for these conferences. Let alone paying. They're the ones hosting these climate conferences. I know the COP28 was hosted in.
In Abu Dhabi.
No, COP27 was COP28 was hosted in Dubai.
Dubai, yes.
The convention on biologic on desertification on desertification
COP16
was
in
hosted in Saudi Arabia, right?
And also we had another one that was going the other day. I forgot, around 2 weeks ago. We also had the same conference going on in Dubai.
So you see, they control everything.
Yeah, sure.
And they use African land to launder Gulf oil emissions while telling us they're going green. Their cities are clean, but what about our cities? What about our communities? What about our people are suffering? Our people don't have enough food. There is loss of livelihoods. But do they care?
Okay.
Do we care?
We don't care.
Do we?
We don't.
Well, we should, because as we speak now, this is happening. Sure. Now, somebody may be asking why this matters. And this is what I would like you to maybe share about. Why do these matters? Why should we be concerned about this? From your perspective, from your community, why should this matter?
Okay, as I said, indigenous communities, or the communities who are the owners of these terrains, are always the one on the receiving end of these the kind of damages happening, especially from the global north. So this discussion matters because we are affected. We are not even we are not directly affected, but we are directly affected by their actions. So it do matters because our voice counts, our concern counts, and also it puts us on the equal measure, because we cannot be one-sided in the call for action. We have to be genuine with each other. If you call action for your end, I also call action for on my end, and we do put the effort, and the commitments should be the same. Because why should I legitimize your emissions, and on my end you don't want? It doesn't add up. So if it's reducing emission, reduce on your end, I reduce on my end, as part of the agreements that was signed in the Paris Agreement.
Yes.
Even the Kyoto Protocol, the Nagoya Protocols, the Copenhagen Protocols, they are all adhered to commitments by countries in reducing emissions. So it doesn't add value, and it is also part of the what do you say, new colonialism that is being extended and entrenched to African countries. I don't know why should there this kind of inferiority mind that I don't know why should they think that African countries are inferior and they are subject to our own rules. Also, the tabulations, the discussion, it should be happening in our lands. It should not be happening there. It is a violation to what we believe, and also to the agreements we always sign each and every day.
I like what you said there about inferiority complex, and you said the people to hold accountable for these are our leaders.
Yeah, sure.
They know what's happening, but they keep doing because of their short-mindedness, their greed, myopia. Right. They can't see beyond kitu kidogo. They can't see beyond my cat, and that is a challenge, because the more we do this, the more these these Gulf states are doing this, even Western companies. What happens is the emissions continue, and they're using African land dispossession, which enables accelerating of fossil fuel extraction. Also, they just continue to expand fossil fuel production without thinking about the repercussions. And then they are the ones to also give speeches on their ambitious commitments, on their bold decisions, bold actions, when there is really no action. So I think that was a great conversation from my end, but I'm biased because I'm the host. I don't know about you though. I would like us to now look at the structural injustices, connecting carbon colonialism to deeper systemic roots. And the question here is Africa solving climate change or subsidizing the West's addiction to it? This comes from your point of conviction, but also facts out there. Are we solving this, or are we just subsidizing the West's addiction to it? Because you've talked about loss and damage, And there is where Africans and other countries from the global south are talking about reparations, right? But we also know we have the debt trap, right?
Yeah, sure.
We have a lot. Kenya and other African countries owe billions of dollars to multilateral development banks like World Bank, the World Bank, the IMF, the Chinese bank. All these are loans we have. But why do Africans still accept these deals? Number two, colonial land systems. Who truly owns the forest? I think that's a question that should be asked. For example, the Mau forest. Who truly owns these forests? Do they have deeds for these forests? A question. Then the neoliberal logic of turning nature into markets. You go into the carbon, the forestry industry, we have the carbon markets. Even soil, now we have soil carbon. There's water, yeah, also coming. Also the plastic, the UNEA, not the INCC negotiations are heading towards that, where now we are going to have another market set up for the plastic polluters. So these are questions that I would like there's only one question I want to ask you from all these. Is Africa solving climate change, or are we subsidizing the West's addiction to it? And not just the West, even the Gulf states. And you see the US, the Britain, all these countries, they have a hand in these Gulf states. They are collaborating in many things. Yeah, so are we solving climate change, or are we subsidizing the West or polluters' addiction to it?
Okay, in my understanding, from what we have seen, or what the way things have been taking place, I can say there is lack of commitment by African countries. The word subsidizing, I think, is the right word, and also legitimizing the pollution and also emissions from the Gulf and the Western countries. This issue you see now after COPs, that's when you see now running up and down, planting of trees, doing this and this. I think we are not really legitimate. We are not really committed to it. Even these commitments are very bogus, very ambitious, very bogus, and it does not add value to what we really believe or to what we really want as far as climate action is concerned. Also, you can see us still we are still on the debt, we're still on the chains of debts, especially from those big financial institutions, because as I said earlier, Africans, if it means commitment, climate finance should not come as form of debt. Yes. Because why should I be paid, or why should I be forced to account for what I have not done? It's one of the greatest injustice. And if African were to if African leaders were to really commit to this, they should reject this kind of debts that are being imposed to countries. The World Bank, we have what they have what we have agreed. What they have agreed on common but deferred responsibility. Like this agreement stipulates that
common but differentiated responsibility.
Common but differentiated responsibility. Yes. The more you do the damage, the more you are responsible to it. So if this fund from World Bank, which are now being channeled to Kenya in form of FLOCA as part of the climate finance, if they truly meant well, they should not come in forms of debt, as I said earlier.
Yes.
Also, the ambitious plans, like for example, even the NDCs, the National Determined Contribution, the CDDS that the country submits to UNCCC, I think sometimes they don't really highlight the core interest that the country needs. Maybe at times we can also say they are putting some effort for like maybe the renewable energy aspect they are doing, but it's just a tip of the iceberg.
Thank you.
So I think that's my...
I look at what you've said there, and it reminds me when I was at the COP27, there was this presentation or a lecture on the problem with negotiations that we have is that all negotiations are position-based rather than interest-based negotiations. If you go to Gikomba today, mtu atakwambia utauliza hii longi ni pesa ngapi, si ndio? Utaambiwa hii leta ruabe ama leta punch, si ndio? Utasema mimi niko na 150 ama niko na hiyo tuso, then mna negotiate, unajifanya unaenda, unakwambia rudi, but siku hizo umekuwa wajanja, anakuambia enda tu. But you see, in the climate negotiations there's nothing like that. You come here, this is our position, let's say it's the Africa group of negotiators, wanasema this is our position as Africa group of negotiators, but you see above them there's another group of negotiators that they have to defer to, the least development countries, blah blah blah. So that's another group of negotiators there, you see. Now they come with their positions, and when you go there you find there's also a group that China belongs to and also Africa belongs to. So China is presenting themselves also as a developing country, and the US is telling them, no, you are a major superpower right now, and we have to respect the common but differentiated responsibilities. We have a responsibility to protect this planet, right? We have a responsibility to protect human rights and all these things. But now there is different responsibilities also, because who is the biggest polluters? China is saying we have polluted, but for a very limited time. You guys are polluted for longer, so you have more responsibility. And our position cannot change. This is our position. And that's how these conferences end with nothing substantial. And they're always pushing to a negotiation after negotiation after negotiation. If they really meant it, we wouldn't be having COP30 now. COP should have ended at COP15, COP16 there. We shouldn't be having Africa Climate Summit after every 2 years. The African Union should, this is my opinion, they should sit down and say, look, this is what we want to do. And this is where we want to move. We want to move in this direction. But they can't. Why can't they? Because the AU itself is not funded by African nations. So they don't have a voice. And that the same thing applies to those positions, because every position is backed by other foreign entities. But if people came with their interests and said, I want this and this to happen because my country needs this community needs compensation for this, and that's why we are demanding for this money. But if we are coming with positions that are covered in opaque deals that we don't know, then you see, if you go there as a climate activist, you are just running a circus. You are in a circus, because there's a section that has been put there for you to organize your protests. You have pavilions there for you to discuss things that will never be implemented. You have books. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry have their booths there, selling books, selling blogs, everything. Renewables, vegans. But the real decisions are being made in the rooms that you are excluded from. And you see, that is the issue.
Sure.
Now, I want to ask you, if Africa had the power and Africa was the one leading the design of global climate finance, global climate justice, what would it look like? And is there an initiative like that out there?
Okay. In the first place, I want to talk about the African group of negotiators.
Yeah.
And I have had an advantage to interact with some of the African group of negotiators from Kenya and from Africa, because I've also failed, I forgot to say that I'm an alumni of Nairobi Summer School on Climate
So am
Justice. So I've had that opportunity to interact with African group of negotiators. And actually I really love the Kenya ministry, because at least it has picked young people who are really, really vast with negotiations.
Yes.
And also packed with a lot of diplomacy that is needed in the negotiation rooms. But it is also imperative, or it's also important to say that this group of negotiators is a conveyor belt. They have been subjected into a conveyor belt whereby they are discussing a circus, so same issues over and over again, without really a substantive agreement or a collective agreement that we've said we have agreed this as a continent, and this is the point, the key points you are going to take as a country. Also, you see the issue of COP. COP itself is very complicated, because first of all, you even need a badge to access to COP. And actually, even in those rooms of negotiations, you see most of the time, Africa is being eliminated from there.
Yeah.
The implementations, the agreements, the COPs are not really shared or are not really made to the public, because actually they are not really much they are not so much focused to it to make sure that it served the intended interest of the continent. So I think it's one of the reasons. So the African group of negotiators has not achieved its reason, and it's one of the things that making even this negotiation sometimes. It's one of the things that are making this discussion sometimes look like it's a joke, because why should we need negotiators every day? Is it the diplomacy aspect that has failed in them? Is it the climate action in them that has failed? Or why is it that we have African group of negotiators every now and then? If the ones we had in the COP27, I think they agreed on something. Why should we have been having them every now and then? I think it's one of the things that makes this discussion of this issue of climate looks a joke.
Yes, and I agree with you on it looking like a joke, because I remember there's a time I used to go to the streets with placards to demand climate justice. I used to run from Nairobi CBD, sometimes from national museums, to Nairobi National Park in Langata Road. I look at those images this day and I feel really stupid. I feel like a clown. I'm like, what was I doing? Who was I demanding climate justice from? They don't care. And you see, you violated something about the Ministry of Environment there. We have brilliant minds in there, right? Great negotiators, brilliant young people. But there's only so much they can do. Because at the end of the day, the decisions do not rely, they don't have the power to make the decisions. The people to make the decisions are those with power. They can only negotiate. But you see, sometimes they may go there and the president has already been told that we want Kenya to go this way. He will just give directions. Negotiate your best. I'm not saying this is what happens, allegedly. Negotiate your best, but ensure that things go this way. So you're already going there compromised. But that is even not the point. The point is, just the same way as our negotiators are facing challenges here, other countries also come there and they negotiate based on bad faith negotiators. For example, let's look at the plastic negotiations, right? The Intergovernmental Committee on INCC. Yeah. I'm forgetting the full meaning of the abbreviation. Right now, we're going to INCC 5.2, right? The things that they cannot agree on are on this on the market things. Who is going to benefit more from this? Because for them, it's just an opportunity. And that's the problem with capitalism. There is no welfare for the people. There is no welfare for the planet. No, only profits every day. And even though there are organizations like Breakthrough from Plastics, Gaia, that are pushing for change, there's just so much they can do. And they remind us that the power belongs to the people. And you can only do that by voting. A voting system that has already been rigged. So how are we going to actually influence change now or in 50 years? Personally, the future is very oblique. I have hope, yes, but you see, hope is a double-edged sword. It can go either way. Now, I would like us to look at 2 or 3 things before we finalize. And I would just like to bring the 2 Africa Climate Summits. What happened and some of the key outcomes and the critical voices missing, and also the stated goals for both. So the one in Nairobi, the ACS 2023, the key outcome was the Nairobi Declaration, which emphasized Africa-led climate solutions. Major focus on carbon markets as a development tool, but for who? UAE Carbon Alliance, 450 million commitment. I already highlighted this. Then they created the Africa Climate Carbon Markets Initiative, ACME. Some of the critical voices that were missing there was the indigenous communities were largely excluded from high-level discussions. The corporate interests dominated the agenda, and this is something that even we organized a protest about it, and they never cared about it. Then the carbon market promotion overshadowed systemic change calls, which people are saying we need change. You know, in the entire Nairobi Declaration, the first draft that came out, the word youth only came up once, and it was in the beginning of the document where they always talk about the stakeholders that are there. Nothing important about youth down there. There was the Africa Youth Assembly, which was marred with a lot of drama and a lot of allegations that have not yet been settled. We don't know what happened there. There was lack of transparency. We had youth who came to Kenya from other countries. Some had flight tickets and didn't have accommodations. Some had accommodation and didn't have flight tickets. So they had accommodation while at home, but no flight tickets. And that just, I think the Africa Climate Summit 2023 painted the picture of what the climate negotiations really are like, what climate action is like. There are people who benefit, then there are people who bear the brunt, be it of climate change, be it of decision making. We are always, we are extras, like those extras in a movie. But at least they get recognized at the end. We are just there playing in a circus. The SES 2 in Dubai, this happened 2 months ago. Actually, last month, September, right?
Addis Ababa, yeah.
So the stated goals were position Africa as unified force to influence COP30, drive reforms to scale grant-based climate finance, not just loans, showcase Africa-led solutions, strengthen national local systems. These are the things you have been saying.
Yeah, sure.
So you see on paper, it looks really good.
It looks good.
But now on key outcomes, the Addis Ababa Declaration solidifying Africa's united political stance on climate finance, adaptation, and mitigation to present at COP30. You see, the goal is on COP30. We are always on the next conference. Climate finance commitments. There was the Africa Green Industrialization Initiative, which secured 100 billion to commitments for green growth. Commitments. Not funds that our leaders can show us. It's just commitments. How many commitments have they given?
A lot of them.
There was the various multi-billion-dollar commitments and reaffirmations were made by countries like Italy and organizations such as the European Investment Bank. The summit also pushed for establishment of new instruments such as the Africa Climate Innovation Compact and the Africa Climate Facility to mobilize additional funding for Africa-led solutions. Who is going to mobilize those funding? A question. Then it also aimed to shift the global narrative from viewing Africa as a solely victim of climate change to driver of innovative climate solution, highlighting Africa's role in leading the way in clean energy and resilience. And now this is the question I want to ask. The implementation challenges. Who is contributing this money? How much? By when? If they fail to, who is going to hold them accountable? Answer that first.
Okay. From the look of the two summits, in the key outcomes, I have not seen where it is saying or where it has been indicated that the African countries themselves are going to commit in driving climate action in their own countries. Meaning, they have failed in the first place because it has shown that even themselves are not in a capacity to influence or to undertake initiatives at their community level. Also, in the part of commitments and contributions, it means that in case there will be a failure to honor the commitments or the pledges, it means the tune will still go high, and the song will continue. The begging ball will still be there. If we had SES2, expect SES3, SES4 as soon as possible. Meaning, it is just going to be a continuation of the same things we are talking about. It's just the drama of what we are talking about. Also, I have not seen in the two declarations, I've not seen their emphasis on indigenous communities who are also part of this discussion and also who plays a bigger role in as far as climate action is concerned. Also, on the aspect of nature-based solutions, I've not seen them putting emphasis on that. And this creates about this creates a perception that African leaders have towards these initiatives. It means now, because we are used to loans driving development plans, the same case applies also to climate actions. So it really exposes the soft belly of the African countries and how systems are so weak, such that they cannot even mitigate and create climate adaptation plans at their own level. Thank you.
Thank you. And now the responsibility lies with African countries, African state, head of states. They never take the initiative. They're always pleading for more funds, listening to other countries commit. Tell me, what is Italy doing in an Africa Climate Summit? What is the European Investment Bank doing in Africa Climate Summit? It's a genuine question. Are we invited to their summits?
Why not?
Do we go there for their summits? We don't. But they invite themselves to ours. Why? Because whoever funds you controls you. And we are funded. Everything is funded. And that is a major challenge that Africa needs to look at. Before we go to the final part of the final segment of this conversation, from what I've heard from you and from what other Africans are saying, we don't want charity, we want justice.
Yes.
And that's from the historical injustices that they've done, from slavery to colonialism and the impacts of colonialism. And that's a conversation they don't want to have. But why? Because they don't want to set a precedence so that we can ask for reparations on some of the things they've done. And they're still doing. Look at Congo, look at Sudan, look at Palestine. The same players, the same criminals, allow me to call them criminals, are the same people doing these things. Then we have grants, not loans, right?
Yeah.
Recognition of sovereignty over resources. It's our resources. Why should you tell us what to do with it? And it's what indigenous communities are saying. This is our land, this is our forests. You found us with it for years. Now you think you are better than us in conserving it. Then free, prior, and informed consent for all projects. This very close to your heart.
Yeah, sure.
So I look at what I've been doing for the past 7 years as a climate activist, and I'm like, am I really a climate activist? I find it a very demeaning term, personally.
Sure.
Because I am more than a climate activist. It's just one of the things that we do. But now, from your perspective, let alone the carbon credits thing, I want to talk about conservation in this last segment.
Okay.
Back in August, we saw one of the impacts of tourism that we never talk about. There was the famous wildebeest migration, which is, I think, one of the wonders of the world. People flocked there, and we saw their migratory route disrupted.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little more context of what happened? Who the people responsible of this were, and what this means, or what this communicates to us Africans? And then you can finalize by talking about the ongoing case that has been presented in court. It has been presented, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yes. You have the floor.
Okay. On the issue of on that issue, it involves a camp called, I think, Carlson, Ritz Carlson. I think owned by J.W. Marriott, and actually, I think it has its root in, I don't know, it's in Europe or in Gulf countries. And whatever we've seen is a violation of the animal migratory routes, and it's a total impunity taking place in the Masai Mara. We have seen one of the activists called Professor Mitame Ololdapash, who has been an activist for quite long, or for a large number of years, filing a petition and also being on the forefront against this kind of impunity. In fact, what Mr. Ololdapash has highlighted, or what we have also seen, is lack of environmental impact assessment by the county government and also the National Environment Management Authority, NEMA. It depicts the level of impunity these organizations or these camps are doing in places like Mara. And Masai Mara is still a community land, but under the management of the county government, who are maybe supposed to manage, who are mandated to do that according to Community Land Act of 2016. So in that matter, it is all about the negligence and the conflict of interest from the county government.
Yes.
You might find that in that camp, you know now how the camps operate in terms of shares.
Yes.
You might find that maybe a certain amount of shares is allocated to the county government staffs, maybe ranking from the governor to that matter. And that one shows it's a high level of conflict of interest, and also the level of impunity and the damage taking place in our ecosystems.
Yeah.
We've seen the wildebeest coming to pass inside the park, the camp, and this really is a stark reminder of the high level of impunity taking place that doesn't come to the cameras. So I think the petition is there and we are closely following it. We also have a case still going on of Olkiombo land, whereby an individual affiliated to the governor, the brother to the governor, wants to grab 4,700 acres of land inside the larger Masai Mara Game Reserve, which is also a community land, and also it speaks a lot about conflict of interest and the abuse of power that individual is taking, and also the level of impunity, the level of ignorance is showcasing, and also depicting how naive and stupid the community is. I think you have seen the assertions made by the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Land, Alice Wahome, about the same. And the said person, the culprit in that matter, has been closely bribing individuals from the members of the community who went to file a petition to the CAMS organization, and also threats and intimidation. But there is one organization that has remained called Resolute Rise, which has really tried to remain unbowed in this petition. And sad enough, the county government who are supposed also to have filed a petition have also done the same, but they have made a very weak submission because they want to manipulate the outcome of the case to favor one of their own. So it's one of the very unfortunate things happening today in our lands, and actually it's one of the things that really touches our heart and makes us to bleed on the kind of the world we live today, where there is blunt impunity like that, and lack of maybe disrespect to the rule of law, and the conflict of interest that these leaders who are in office showcase, and also tells the kind of ignorance, the naivety that the community showcase in such times. And I'm reminded one of the quotes, I don't know if it was said by one of the philosophers, that in your silence at a times of at a trying moment like this means you are siding with the oppressors. These are the words of Bishop Desmond Tutu. It tells of how other leaders also have kept silent over these injustices, from that issue of the Ritz-Carlton Park camp to that issue of Olkiombo. It tells the negligence and also the kind of maybe cowardice our leaders are showcasing at the height of impunity like that.
Thank you. I am overwhelmed listening to this because I want to ask so many questions. So you said the governor's brother wants to grab land of how many acres? 4,700 acres.
4,700 acres of land.
And you've talked about naivety, stupidity, and ignorance. How is the community to blame for this, governor, for this person's actions?
Okay, the first place I cannot really entirely blame the community, but a few members of the community who chose to side with the oppressor. because there are a few individuals who are also in the process or justifying that the lands belong to the said individual, which is very, very wrong. The issue where the community comes in is the fact that maybe they are not aware of what's going on, they are not varnished with the court rulings, and also they are not represented at any way, because actually the one who was supposed to represent them is the county government. But now you see they are also part of they have conflict of interest in that case, because even the latest action they did was to urge the court to list out an organization that was also coming in as an interested party representing the community.
I see, I see. Thank you for that insight. And on the Mara, uh, I've heard you've talked about uh, company JW Marriott, that's based in the US, by the way, Maryland. You've talked about county government failure of oversight and also in enforcing laws. But I think the tourists themselves also have a responsibility in this, because they made conscious or subconscious decision with the crowd mentality to disrupt this, uh, to disrupt this, to disrupt the wild beast. Some of them even ran into crocodile-infested waters. And you see, this, you'll find there are very interesting people there from Europe, from the US, that are against animal cruelty. You'll find Kenyans there that are against corruption, are against impunity. But they were there. You've not given them any responsibility. Are they not to blame also for this? Because I think that's a genuine question we should be asking.
Okay, now the issue of Masai Mara, there is what we call the Masai Mara management plan that was implemented in 2023, and it came with a lot of complexities. And today we have tour guides in the Mara who guides, although I'm not a resident of Mara, but at least I have some basic information about it. We have the tour guides, maybe who tries at times to speak of these injustices, but we see them being banned away from not to step again the park by use of the county askaris, the use of game warden, the games warden, who are being used to enforce this kind of impunity. So whoever tries to raise the voice against this impunity find himself being intimidated and sometimes being banned from accessing the Mara. It is a kind of just impunity we have seen that is very shocking and glaring level of impunity that is taking place in the Mara. It is a whole rot. It's something that needs to be debunked. It needs a lot of transformation, and that one, the responsibility solely lies in the county government, because it's not the responsibility of the I think the KWS plays a role in protecting the wildlife, animals, but anything that does with Mara, any from human beings to infrastructural development, lies in the county government because they're the one who collects revenue there.
I thank you for that, Gabriel. I think this is a conversation that we should also invite the audience, our audience here, and I think it would be important to ask them to imagine this or to think about it. If Africa led the design of climate action, climate finance, and all this, what would it look like? You're welcome to post your comments in the comment section there, or you can reach out to us directly through our social media at TUA Podcast uh, or the Another African Podcast across all social media platforms. Thank you so much, Gabriel, for joining us today, and this has been a great session for me, and I hope it has been for you too.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm so much glad to be here. I'm so humbled to share my insights, my inputs from the carbon market, indigenous perspective to conservation. And this one is it's an effort, or maybe it's a commitment to have one voice as youth, especially from Kenya, to make sure that also we are versed with these discussions. So I'm so much glad to be here, and I really appreciate for this. I will not take it for granted, and I think we'll move forward from this. Thank you so
The
much.
pleasure is ours. I would like to say the pleasure is all mine, but I don't want to take all the pleasure from you.
Yeah.
Asanteni sana. Thank you so much for joining us, Gabriel, for this. And please invite us to Masai, to your community, so that we can also talk to them and get to hear from them in person. Thank you for joining us for this session. I would just like to leave you with one statement. The rivers, remember, the land know who they belong to. The question is, do we? My name is Jeffet Orieny, and TUA na sisi. See you on the next episode.